In today's video, we're going to talk about how to stand on a leg where the knee buckles or the knee seems to want to bend when you load that leg. So in this video, you're going to learn what some of the reasons are or things that can cause a knee to bend. And of course, tools and exercises to help restore knee stability for a knee that seems to want to bend every time you put weight on it. If you're new to this channel, I'm Tara, I'm a neurologic physical therapist, and on this channel we talk about anything and everything related to mobility, health, fitness, and mindset in the context of neurologic injury with the end goal of empowering you with as many tools as possible to take ownership of your rehab and your health to live an overall more active, more mobile, pain-free, happier, healthier life. And all that said, today we're going to go over an extremely common problem that I get a lot of questions about, and that is, what do I do if my knee feels like it wants to bend every time I go to stand on it? So first, let's just talk about why your knee might want to bend. So probably the most common reason that I can think of is that the quads, the muscles that hold the knee straight, are weak, and so the leg collapses. And that's probably what most of you think as well. That's probably the most obvious reason why your knee might bend. But it can also be from weakness in the muscles that point the foot. So the pointer muscles, the gastrocnemius and the soleus muscles on the back of the lower leg, if those muscles are weak, those muscles, if they point the foot when your foot is on the ground, it's going to take it from a flexed position. So let's say that the muscles are back here, right? It's going to take it from a flexed position. It's going to pull this tibia bone backwards. The knee sits right above that, so it's going to bring that knee back. If those muscles are weak, that too will cause the knee to bend. Okay, so those are just straight up very isolated, weak muscles in the lower leg. But there are other reasons why your knee might seem like it just wants to bend every time you stand on it. One is a flexor synergy pattern. So if you've ever seen a baby and you've kind of tapped the bottom of their foot and their leg just kind of withdraws, we call that a flexor withdrawal. That's another reason why your knee might try and bend when you load it. Just something to keep in mind, it's not always weakness. When we get to some of the tips and tricks and exercises in a little bit, we're going to go over exercises specifically for that. So the way you might know if that's the reason your knee is bending is if your leg does that a lot when you're laying down, just kind of flexes up towards your body. You might be experiencing that when you go to stand on it. It's flexing up off the ground, which gives you that sensation. Well, your knee is actually bending, but it's not like your body's falling down. It's actually like your foot is drawing up towards your body. So just something to be aware of. And then the last reason is lack of coordinated muscle control. When we are standing on our leg, our glutes and our quads have to work together. We call that a co-contraction. Co-contraction of the glutes and the quads, meaning that your hips move forward and your knee moves back at the same time. What I have found is that in some cases, some people are so focused on moving that knee backwards that when they go to move it back, they kind of do this motion and they get used to doing this motion because you're thinking, get that knee straight, and you just kind of learn that habit. But you see, my hip is not extending, I'm just getting my knee straight, right? What we need to do is co-contract hip and knee together. So if, for example, I tell someone to stand up tall, they really don't know how to control the knee because they can't do that co-contraction of the hip and the knee together. Okay, so those are all the reasons that might cause someone's knee to buckle. But now you can see I'm holding a tool in my hand here. Let's talk about some of the tools that you can use to relearn this movement of keeping your knee straight when you're standing on your leg and when you're walking, so that you don't feel like your knee is going to buckle. This is what we call a floor reaction AFO. It's got a foot plate that is attached to this shell that goes on the front of your shin. Okay, so if you can see, if your foot's down here and there's this pylon or this pillar that comes up the front of your leg, it's going to push your shin bone backwards and it's going to keep your leg straight. So who is this kind of a brace good for? This kind of a brace is good for someone where either you haven't quite learned how to control the hip and the knee together yet. Maybe you have some co-contraction issue. Maybe you do just have some weakness in your quads or your pointer muscles in your ankle. This brace would be good as well. The downside of this that I have seen more frequently than I care to mention is that someone gets put in this brace too early. So someone gets put in this brace maybe while you're even still in the hospital within the first couple of weeks after having your stroke or brain injury, and no one ever reassesses you. So yes, it's a great brace, but putting someone in this brace too early, what I have found is someone then does get some of that quad strength back, and now you end up with the opposite issue where now you're hyperextending your knee because no one ever reassessed you to take you out of this brace and maybe put you in something that had a plantar flexion stop. So different phases of recovery, you're going to have kind of different movement related problems that are going to come up very early on. People are what we call flaccid, right? I've talked about that a lot, where the legs kind of limp. And then very quickly, some of you develop spasticity, where you have involuntary contraction in the muscles in the lower leg, primarily the muscles that point the foot. So you could see if you started to develop that overactivity in the muscles that point the foot, and now we're putting you in a brace that's throwing your shin bone backwards, further putting you into that pointing position, that might not be good. So two things that you could do. The easiest one is that I've seen, I still don't love it, but people put a heel wedge underneath the brace. And you can see if you put a heel wedge underneath the brace, it's going to unlock that knee. That's one modification. The preferred modification, if someone's really starting to develop a lot of spasticity, is to put someone or to have someone fitted for an articulated AFO with a plantar flexion stop. Now, you don't need to know all of that. The only reason I mention that is because it is extremely, extremely important that you stay in contact with your orthotist. And again, some of you get a brace when you're in the nursing home, or you get a brace in rehab, and that orthotist never gives you their information. If you're a family member or you have a family member that's in a hospital, make sure you get that orthotist's information so that you can follow up with them. Again, with every stage of recovery, there's probably going to need to be some adjustments made to that AFO. But if you cannot stand because your knee will not stay straight, bracing is an excellent tool to help you feel that movement, feel confident on that leg, get weight bearing on that leg, and kind of the weight bearing on the leg sometimes triggers those muscles to kind of wake up. That's why tools are so, so, so valuable. So, keeping in line with that theme, something very basic that you can buy on Amazon is a knee immobilizer. Now, you want it to cover as much of your leg as possible. So if you're tall, get the longest one possible, and you want it to fit and you want it to be very tight. But that's, again, just another tool that's pretty cheap that you can use to, again, get weight bearing on that leg so that you are setting yourself up or giving yourself the best opportunity for those muscles to just kind of automatically kind of kick back in. It's a safety mechanism or a protective mechanism. It's hardwired into our brain. You've got to get up on your feet as early as possible, because we have these ingrained patterns that we can really use in those early stages. So anything we can use as far as tools to allow someone to get back up on their feet, except for a Hemi walker. You guys have heard me talk about Hemi walkers. If you haven't, leave it in the comments. I'd be happy to do another video on appropriate and not as ideal assistive devices in early stages. But yes, tools can be extremely, extremely valuable and are absolutely necessary to get back to a point where you can walk normally. Okay, So those are the tools. We've gone over some of the reasons that might cause your knee to buckle, but now let's go ahead and dive into some exercises that you can do in the early stages where maybe you need a little bit of active assist. So we'll go over some active assist exercises, and then of course, active knee extension exercises. And as usual, we will always follow it up with functional activities. All right, now I know I said we were going to start with active exercises, but I did want to show you a passive method, which is where most people need to start if you are someone that has that weakness in your ankle or in your knee, and that is with the brace I mentioned earlier. So you can see this is passive. It's pushing the knee backwards. That lower part, when you load the leg, your knee cannot buckle. Now this one is the only size I have, and it's a little bit too big for my foot, so that's why it looks a little funny on the shoe, because I couldn't slide it all the way in my shoe. But you can see, so this would be kind of like step one, and then if that doesn't work, then you would add something like a knee immobilizer to just give you more support, again, starting with more of a passive loading so you can feel the weight bearing. Okay, and now you're totally locked in. You've got that lower shell on the front of your lower leg pushing the tibia backwards, and then if you needed it, you add the knee immobilizer to give even more stability. And then you work on the same progression that I work on in a ton of videos. Weight shift, heel, lift. Weight shift, heel, lift. Now I will tell you one problem with this brace, and I will put a link for it that you can purchase on Amazon for this brace. But I will tell you, most insurances, if you have any type of a neurologic injury, will cover this kind of brace if you haven't had a brace purchased for you, a custom AFO with an orthotist in the last 5 years. Or for those of you that have had a brace made for you in the last 5 years, get with a really good orthotist and physical therapist if you've had any change in your functional status, a hospitalization. There are a lot of reasons why you can justify to an insurance company to get them to pay for another brace if it's within that 5 years. So don't just take no for an answer. Really work with your insurance company, work with the appropriate healthcare professionals who can write a really good letter of medical necessity if they do deny it the first go around. Okay, but one thing I want to mention about this type of floor reaction AFO, or in particular the carbon variations of this, is it's very hard to go downstairs, because you can see if it pushes your lower leg back, your tibia, or your knee, actually has to bend when you're going downstairs. And if you try and do it with this brace on, meaning you step down with this leg first, I have seen people break this brace. Okay, so it's a low profile brace, it's lightweight, which are really great attributes, especially if you're someone that has Guillain-Barré or MS, where energy is really a huge problem, or conserving energy, or having the endurance in the muscle to do prolonged walking. Those features of it, the lightweight, low profile, are very nice to have, but it does make it a little bit more susceptible to breaking, or it decreases the integrity of the brace just a little bit. But with that on, you're going to do the weight shift, heel lift, weight shift, and then you can see when that knee wants to buckle, it's going to push back. You're getting weight bearing on that leg, really tapping into every internal mechanism, not just voluntary control, but as I mentioned earlier, some of those protective ingrained patterns that we have in our brain. You're tapping into all of that by being able to stand on a leg that does not buckle, even if that means you're using tools. Now, the other thing that does, especially in the early stages, is prevent or decrease the risk of learned non-use or compensation. Now, I've talked about this a lot on this channel. Learned non-use is basically immediately after an injury, in that very early stage when you have no movement, you go to move it, it doesn't move. Your brain recognizes that, and you quickly start to compensate with the other side, or your brain just goes into that adaptive mode of compensating with the other side of your body. That becomes a habit. decreasing the use and the potential for rewiring on the damaged side of the brain. That's an extremely brief synopsis of some of the full videos that I've done on learned non-use, but if you Google or if you put in the YouTube search engine Rehab HQ and learn non-use or Rehab HQ and negative neuroplasticity, you will get to some of those videos. But that is another reason why, if you are someone where your knee is buckling, tools can be so valuable. Not only will it help to tap into those ingrained patterns that we have, those kind of primitive patterns, but also you want to decrease the risk of developing some of those compensatory patterns. So shift, again, this is just passive. We're going to get to exercises in a minute. Step and back, okay? Passive, getting that leg straight. This is kind of like a bottom-up approach, okay? But bottom up, just like with any company or business, bottom up is not going to work if you don't also have top down. Why do I mention that? As quickly as you feel like your knee isn't jamming into the front of that knee immobilizer, like you don't feel your knee trying to bend inside that, you want to take the knee immobilizer off. And then you can just kind of back down one tool at a time. All right, so, and then you're going to reattempt that same sequence with just the lower leg blocked, or just kind of working that kind of bottom up or that passive assistance from just the lower leg and go through the same progression. And then, of course, as quickly as you can, you want to get out of that. Now, I can't stress enough that there is a time and a place for this kind of brace. So just purchasing one on your own, I don't think is the best option. If you live in the US, you have access to orthotists, you have access to the healthcare professionals that can help assess you to make sure that it is the right brace for you. But again, pushes that knee back. Okay, so that's like passive. Then we'll get into active assisted. Then we'll get into active. Then we'll get into resisted. Remember, that's kind of the progression of activities, or the way that it should go when you're trying to restore a movement. So passive, and now let's get into active assisted. All right, so I've hooked the resistance band, pull-up assist loop. I really love these bands, into a wall anchor. I've done a recent video on something that can simulate a wall anchor that you just wrap around your door. I'll put a link for that product and the link to the video where I talk about alternatives to kind of like a wall anchor for holding a resistance band. The door one works fabulous. Again, the link for that video will be below. But you do, if you are someone that you know it's kind of coordinating that hip and knee to work together, I like having like 2 points of contact on the lower leg, one below the knee and one above the knee, and getting into a little bit of a lunge position. And that's just because that's usually where it's the most challenging if you are someone that has that difficulty co-contracting. Where it becomes a little bit more problematic is when that foot gets a little bit behind you. So you're going to, what it also does is it keeps the ankle dorsiflex, so it prevents some of the, like what we call an extensor synergy pattern, where the foot is going to want to point when the knee bends. You're really just isolating knee and hip and taking the ankle out of it, what I call an out of synergy movement training. And then again, you're just gonna bend that knee and straighten it out. Now, I am holding on. It's not cheating to hold on. Again, we want to train your brain, and as much as we can decrease the stress level of your brain and make you feel safe, the more you can focus on the movement. So holding on is not cheating, but as soon as you feel like you can let go, then you would want to try a few without holding on. If you let go and you are totally unsuccessful, hold on again. No, nothing wrong with that. Again, we're just trying to normalize that movement pattern and set you up for success. So we let it bend straight. This is active assisted. All right, and then once you can do that, you can try and do like a little forward step. Again, you can hold on, maybe move this off to the side and do a forward step. now you're adding that with a function. So you're adding that forward step and feeling that knee, getting that active assist of that knee extending and really that hip extending by having this additional point of contact above the knee. All right, now we're getting into a little bit of an active technique. I always like, and I talk about this a lot, laying down is a great position to start learning a new movement pattern. Your body feels more safe and you're stabilizing the joints above the hip and the knee, or in any case, I always like starting to laying down because you're stabilizing the other joints around the joint you're trying to work, and it's an easier place to start to set yourself up for success. So, you guys have been around for a while, you know I love exercises laying down first before getting into functional activities. And this would be the exercise that I love, love, love for those of you that don't feel confident on your leg or it's buckling. Laying down on your stomach, stabilizing your trunk really does help to emphasize just that knee and hip. Also, by having the foot up a little bit higher, you're getting the leg, you'll notice when I show it to you again, kind of behind you a little bit, which is really where a lot of you guys have the most trouble keeping that knee straight, or where you feel the most vulnerable because your center of mass is kind of in front of the leg or in front of the foot. And there's definitely much more force that would cause that leg to buckle in that moment. So you can see as I show this to you again, you're kind of almost going into that hyperextended position. You're just trying to lift that knee up off of the mat. If you have an AFO, because I get this question a lot, should I do these exercises with my AFO on? I would say yes. If your foot is pointing at all when you do this exercise and you do have an AFO, in particular an AFO with a plantar flexion stop, you'll know that it has that is one way. There's multiple ways to get a plantar flexion stop, but one of the most common ways is that you'll see like a screw. If you have a plastic AFO, you'll see like a screw kind of where your Achilles tendon is, or kind of right behind your ankle. That's one way to know that you have that. If you have a AFO with a plantar flexion stop, then I would say, and you notice that your foot's pointing when you do this exercise, I would say start with your AFO on until you feel like you can do it without getting any involuntary pointing of your lower leg. Very, very, very crucial to normalize this movement pattern. All right, now for this exercise, it looks like a step down, but we're really emphasizing the step up component of this. So we're still following kind of the same progression. We went from passive, active assisted with the band, to active kind of against gravity laying down. Now this is active against gravity with load. So remember, you don't want to skip over phases or skip over the appropriate level of difficulty throughout this process. That's really when I see people get frustrated and start to develop some compensatory strategies. So that they rushed it a little bit too quickly. Maybe they went right from passive to step ups. And then you're going from something that's a very, very easy form of keeping the knee straight, passive or active assisted, right up to very challenging where you're adding a load. Want to hit all the stages: passive, active assisted, against gravity, generally speaking. This one, it's a little bit confusing because whether you're laying down or uh, standing, it's a little bit different. But in generally speaking, for any progression of activities of adding difficulty, you want to kind of keep this progression: passive, active assisted, against gravity eliminated, or if you can, if there's a way to do it, gravity eliminated, which is parallel to the floor. Against gravity, movement is occurring, moving away from the floor. Then add load. The load in this case would be your body weight. So step down, and then the step back up is that knee extension. Start with a very low step. This is a 2-inch step. I highly recommend that you start with a very low step. It is challenging. We're adding load. This is very, very, very difficult. And then where you would go from here is you would just change the step height. So if you go to a higher step, you're just working through a larger range of motion with the knee. And yes, it will be more difficult. First of all, because you have to generate more force because you have to go up to a higher surface. So potential energy, for those of you that are physics nerds, but yes, going up, it does make that more difficult, but also you're working the muscle at different parts of the contraction. So that's going to be a new experience. So every time you make that you have to adjust, you have to give your body time to adjust to that new experience. So take your time. If you're going to go to a higher step and you maybe haven't been holding on, hold on again, get used to that new range, do it a few times until you feel safe, and then take your arm off of whatever you're holding on to. All right, now I've shown this before, but I love these cheap little stair steppers. You can start sitting on a bar stool, a higher stool, get your feet in position, and then step up onto it. But you can see this is really working on that coordinated hip and knee extension. But just because of the way that the pedal is designed, it doesn't let your foot point. So it's again working that out of synergy, but it's also working dissociation. So I did forget to mention that earlier. It's kind of a distant cousin root cause, but sometimes someone can't keep their knee straight when they're standing on it because they can't dissociate, meaning whatever the left side of your body does, the right side of your body wants to do the same thing. It's very common after a stroke. So learning how to get each side of the body to do opposite movements at the same time can sometimes be difficult for some people, and you do need to train that. So the nice thing about a stair climber is it does kind of force that or encourage that because it forces the other leg up. So you're working dissociation, but again, you're also working on how to coordinate that hip and knee together. So you can see hip and knee have to work together to get that pedal down. The other thing you have to do, or else it just doesn't work, is you have to weight shift. You have to shift your weight onto that involved leg, or else it's just not going to move. And I've seen that. I've seen that a lot with people that can't dissociate as well, is that like they can get to here, right? Because both legs are doing the exact same thing, but they cannot release the opposite leg to push this one down because they can't get that leg to bend when the other one is trying to go straight. So a stair stepper just works a variety of movement problems that are very common after a neurologic injury. So again, you have to weight shift. If you keep all your weight, say this is your uninvolved leg, if you keep all your weight over there, it's not going to move. You have to shift your weight. So you're working that weight shift, loading that leg and that hip and knee extension. All right, now let's talk about function. We've done the movement retraining. Now we need to put it into action where we're loading the leg without any type of bracing on it and working on that hip and knee extension. Same progression. I'm never going to stop showing it because it's always good to review just to make sure you guys aren't skipping over steps. Weight shift, heel lift. If the knee buckles, hold on, or get in a corner and have your hands against the wall for safety, not for because you might fall, but because it calms your brain down and sometimes it's easier for you to focus on keeping that knee straight. So heel lift. Once you can do that, shift, push. Think about pushing that knee back and bringing those hips forward. Remember, a lot of you are in the habit of when you want to push, straighten that knee out, your butt's going back and you've lost that ability to extend the hip and the knee at the same time. So push and tuck the bottom in and step. Okay? So push, tuck the bottom in and step. If you don't need to hold on to anything because you feel safe, sometimes I will cue people to put their hands behind their back. That will help you to feel what it feels like to kind of get your hips forward, or you'll feel a little bit more of when they drop back, step, step, okay? And then where do we go from there? For those of you that have been around for a while, hold on. Now I'm showing this a little bit different. I'm using a foam roller this time. A lot of times I have a yoga block in between my legs, but I'm going to show you why. Shift, tap, and down. Okay, now the yoga block would be an easier variation of this, but I don't show this enough. I do like something that rolls because if you're not shifted, you're going to immediately feel that thing, that roll. It's going to roll right out from under you. So it's just another variation. This is more challenging than a yoga block because if you have your center of gravity to the left of your leg at all, or to the opposite side at all, in other words, it's not centered over the foot that you're standing on, you're going to immediately feel it because that thing is going to roll. Okay, so I like a half foam roller. If you have already gotten good at the yoga block, tap and down, tap and down, shift, hip and knee, tap and down, shift, squeeze, tap and down, shift, squeeze, tap and down, shift, squeeze, knee back, hips forward, tap and down. All right, and then the very last thing that I want to mention that I love, love, love is backwards walking. It's something we don't emphasize enough, and I'm shocked at the number of people that I see that have been in rehab, neuro rehab for years, and no one's ever shown them or taught them how to walk backwards. So it's an invaluable skill, but it's also a great learning tool to normalize movement patterns for several reasons. One is it's an out of synergy movement, so you have to learn how to bend your knee and extend your hip. Remember, hip extension and knee extension and foot pointing usually go together, so it's an out of synergy movement, which we always want to work. Remember, our after recovery, we move in kind of what we call synergy patterns, and then the very next step is out of synergy patterns. A lot of people get stuck in those synergy patterns, and then we would call that an abnormal movement synergy, where muscles have linked up abnormally together. A very common one is the entire leg locking out and the foot pointing, which does cause some of you to go in that knee hyperextension. Some of you, it makes you feel like you're falling backwards because your foot wants to point. So that could be signs that you have this abnormal synergy pattern. Long story short, backwards walking, you have to flex your knee or bend your knee and extend your hip to step backwards. So that's one reason. The other reason backwards walking, it's functional. You can't open a door or a refrigerator or really anything without taking a step backwards. So it is functional. And so that's the other reason. But then the other reason is it really does work on that knee extension. It also works on loading the leg with the foot behind you, which is a lot easier for some people than bringing the foot behind you, right? So once you can get it there, you're working on what I talk quite a bit about on this channel, that's a very scary position for people with their foot behind them. So you're really working on that, but also that movement of hip and knee extension as you load that leg. All right, and then that is it for this video. I hope you guys found this video helpful. Links to all the products that I talked about in this video are in the description below. If you like this type of video and you want to see more videos like this, and you haven't yet subscribed, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and turn on that notification bell so that you'll get notified every time I upload new videos. As a reminder, we do have 2 membership programs. One will give you access to a PDF handout that has pictures and descriptions of all of the exercises that I showed in this video, so that you can just take that to your therapy area in your home and just start applying or implementing these exercises into your home exercise routine. But if you want to go a little bit deeper, we also have a gold membership program, which gives you access to over 400 exercises that are part of the home exercise vault that I use to create home exercise programs for the patients that I see in person. You just have full access to that. You also have access to our live monthly webinars, which is new this year. So every month I do like kind of like a little mini lecture on a different topic. So you have access to those, and our monthly live Q&As where you can submit questions in advance, and we meet once a month on the same day as the webinar to answer all of your questions. So if you want to learn more about any of those programs, you can visit rehab-hq.com. I enjoyed spending time with y'all today, and I'll see you in the next video. Have a good day.